Welcome to the Landscaping Podcast. My name is Joel Barnett and I'm your host. And today I'm talking with Steve Rooney from Living Edge Construction. Steve runs a landscape construction company based in Bendigo, and he's got a great story about his journey in the landscaping industry. So he's had two different partnerships throughout the course of Living Edge, and now he's doing it solo and having some great success. And part of that is due to the business coaches that he's using. So he mentions the benefits of having those business coaches and when he signed up with them. And something that I loved that he mentioned was that part of the way through having the business, he decided to study horticulture and landscape design, not because he wanted to do any landscape design necessarily. He just likes to learn more. So he just wanted to learn more about the industry so he can get a better understanding of things. So I think that's a great mindset to have. And there's plenty of other things that Steve talks about that he does well throughout this chat. So hopefully you enjoy this chat with Steve Rooney. Steve, thank you very much for joining us on the Landscaping Podcast. My first question for you is, how did you start in the industry?
Thanks, Joel. Thanks for having me. How I got started in the industry, early 2000s, I'd decided that uni wasn't for me. And my best mate at the time, who was later on my best man at my wedding, his dad ran a landscape company. And he put me and another bloke up for a bit of a competition, if you like, to see who would get an apprenticeship out of it, and I won. So yeah, I worked for that guy for a bit over 5 years. We middle of the drought, I suppose, so landscaping wasn't necessarily a very exciting prospect. We got rid of a lot of people's dead lawns and covered them with pebbles, and it wasn't very pretty.
I remember those times.
Yeah, I never, like, working through that, I never wanted to own my own business. I thought, geez, if I'm putting rocks around people's lawn areas for the next 30 years, that's not very exciting. I don't want to stick into it. So an ordinary start purely because of the drought. But
I remember we used to just be putting in tall fescue. That was like the only lawn we ever used. And then we went around and we were ripping them out and putting little toppings in. And then and then when the drought ended, we'd go around and ripping that out and putting cooch and kikuyu in, and no one ever used tall fescue again.
Yeah. Well, we still get requests for tall fescue, which I try my best to convince people otherwise, but sometimes it works.
Yeah, I love it, but it does like the fact that it doesn't repair the dead patches is what turns me off it. You just like it. Feeding it with water is not a problem, but having to go and buy a piece or seed any bare patches, better off go with one of the running varieties.
Absolutely, yeah, and especially when it's dry up here, like we're pretty dry in Bendigo, so it can be a little bit of hard work trying to keep that alive in a string of 40-degree days. So
So after 5 years there, what happened? What did you do then?
I decided enough was enough. I wasn't necessarily getting along with my boss particularly well. So I left and went and worked for another couple of mates of mine, which didn't necessarily work out too well. Maybe dreams and aspirations weren't quite kicking in with the kind of work that they wanted, plus the work they were getting. So I didn't work there for very long, maybe not even a year. Then worked for another guy, which was really good, but I was just a casual worker. So I was a qualified with all the brains. Well, I thought I had all the brains, and I was just, I don't know, back to shoveling rock again, that kind of thing. So I wasn't relied on for any expertise or anything like that, and then got poached by another guy who I spent another 5 years at. Did some pretty good stuff, even down in Port Arlington. We did a job down there, and thought, geez, I just had my first kid. This is started 2012. We just had our first daughter, and I'm miles away from home for 4 nights a week. And I thought, this isn't much fun. I wouldn't mind being home with my wife and daughter. So a mate who I actually worked with at my first employee, he said to me, hey, look, I've got a few jobs on the side that I'm doing. Do you want to maybe join up and we'll start a business? And I said, yeah, let's do that. So I gave 14 weeks notice, I think it was, by the time I gave notice to when I started. And mid-2012, we started Living Edge, and still going.
So with the first guy you worked for, what sort of work were you doing there? Was it similar to stuff what you're doing now?
No, completely different. Everything, I would say, has changed. We did a lot of, it's now called Adbri, but a lot of C&M brick, paving, retaining wall, big, 400 odd mill blocks. Everything was big and heavy and bulky. We do very little of that kind of work now. Everything's that little bit more prettier, I suppose. And as I said before, ripping out people's lawns and putting stone down. That was the run of the mill. Did the occasional clay paving around a pool, which again is something that you just wouldn't go near anymore. So yeah, works. The type of work has changed massively.
Yep. There would have been some 40-kilo bags of cement still kicking around in the early day.
Absolutely. If they weren't 40-kilo bags of cement, we'll carry 2 of them.
I was just thinking that the other day. It's crazy how that was just normal back in then, that you got to lug around a 40-kilo bag of cement.
Yeah. And like I see some of especially the young kids that you might get coming along for work experience or apprentices and stuff like that, and you're thinking, 20 kilos is their limit, and here we were. There was no other option. You had to carry it. Didn't matter.
Yeah. So how did you guys have work lined up to start with, or or was that what the 14 weeks was for, just trying to build that up?
No, we did have work to start off with. One particular job, actually a chicken farmer up here. He was a friend of the family of my first business partner, and that was it wasn't a massive job, but there was a lot of sort of work involved in it. And my mate Nat at the time, he was only sort of part-time anyway. So there was a couple of days a week where we'd work together. And then other than that, I was there by myself. So it took us a little bit to get through it. And then it was just a matter of now what do we do? But we ticked on. We got a couple of little jobs sort of, through friends and that kind of thing. And it slowly took over. And then, we still had pretty quiet winters. You get to probably April, May, and there was nothing to do. Like, nobody knew who we were. Nobody knew we existed. Unless we had friends that needed something done, we were kind of like, ooh, okay, this could be fun. But yeah, gradually, as business gets bigger and people find out who you are, it gets that little bit easier to fill in the gaps.
Yep. Did you have any formal agreement in place for the partnership?
No. It was, mate, I'll work with you. That's good. That was probably about it. Yeah.
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 And then, so how did you start getting work? Was it other than word of mouth? Was there any advertising that you were doing?
No, it was all word of mouth. We did get some business cards made, and then again, probably a little bit word of mouth. Like we just knew some suppliers in town that we'd known for many years. Like, both of us had been involved in landscaping for probably, me by about 12 years by that stage. So we dropped the cards in at various places and wished for the best. But yeah, there was no, I wouldn't say there was a plan involved in getting work.
And the business name was Living Edge Constructions then?
It was Living Edge Landscape and Design, which I've done a design diploma, and I'm pretty happy I don't necessarily advertise that I do design, because I don't have time to do it myself. And like I've got a pretty good eye for it, but yeah, I'm better at building it and other stuff than I am at drawing what I've got in my head most of the time.
Yeah. When did you do the design diploma?
I finished that was either 2017 or 18. I finished that. I did a double diploma, Horticulture and Design. So,
and what was the reason behind that? So you'd already had your business going at that stage?
Yeah. We'd been going for sort of 5 or 6 years by the time I started that. It was part-time through the TAFE Institute up here. I've always wanted to know more. I've always sort of felt like with my first boss, there was a lot of, like, I was probably the first one to be qualified that worked there. There was guys that were skilled that weren't necessarily qualified that were above me. And so to a degree, I probably felt like I was maybe self-taught. And probably from that, I've probably picked up this idea that I don't know enough. I haven't been shown how to do something. I need to kind of educate myself. So I've always sort of looked for more knowledge. And that was probably part of it. I just wanted to be better at, not necessarily doing a design, but better at understanding a design or why something should go where. And then the Hort thing, I like plants. I know about 4 of them. That's about it. So to understand more plants and understand, again, where they go, why they should go there, what their best sort of environment to be in. Yeah, I just wanted to know more.
Yep. Yeah, that's a good trait to have for running your own business, so then you can learn more and you can, it spread your skills, but especially in landscaping.
Yeah. And I mean, as you've mentioned plenty of times on this podcast, we kind of do a lot. We wear a lot of hats. So yeah, I don't know. Maybe I put too much pressure on myself trying to know too much about too many different things. So yeah.
And do you enjoy the business as well? Like, so when you were going to learn more about it, were you enjoying that side of things?
Um, at that stage, no, probably not really. Now's probably a bit different. I'm off the tools a little bit, so I'm getting more of that sort of exposure to running a business as opposed to digging a hole or laying pavers or whatever it might be. Whereas, yeah, sort of 2016, 17, maybe even before that, I probably, yeah, like we were good at our job, but yeah, running a business, again, we didn't really know what we were doing, winging it most of the time. And then what are we? End of 2017, my first business partner decided that enough was enough anyway. So I was sort of staring down the barrel of doing something else or continuing on, which I obviously did. So yeah, things were changing anyhow, and I still didn't really know what we were doing.
Yeah. So how was that? Was that a clean exit with him leaving?
Yeah, it was. Yeah, it was good. We're still mates now, so it was probably there was probably a bit going on behind the scenes that probably led to that decision. You know, we're both in pretty good places now, so maybe it was stemmed from the idea that we didn't know what we were doing. We didn't have a plan. We didn't know how to market ourselves. We didn't know how to run a profit and loss. We sure as hell didn't know how to read one. So yeah, there's probably a few things going on that you can only wing it for so long. And maybe we winged it pretty well for 5 years, but yeah, we'll probably get into the end of the tether of something's got to change, and he was pretty keen to move on.
Yeah, I found it fascinating talking with Tim from Cascade Landscapes when he was talking about he said he put employees on too early, but then he was talking about it and like everything all turned out well in the end. So there's a lot of people who just sort of do things that aren't perfect, but for a while it works out okay. But then when times get tough, that's when it can start to turn pear shaped pretty quick.
Yeah, probably foundation, I reckon, might be a little bit of that. We sort of, as I said, we didn't have a plan, so we didn't have a real scope of how we got better or how we moved forward. So once it did get that little bit difficult, like there was weeks on end that we didn't get paid, like ourselves. Like the business might have been having revenue, but it didn't have any profit, and it just made it difficult to live. So my wife's a teacher. It was probably a little bit easier for us to survive that. We'd still only had one child by that stage. He had two, so there was that bit of extra pressure from home life that this either better work or we've got to do something else. So certainly once it went pear-shaped pretty quick.
Yeah. And so then what? Then you went off by yourself then, kept going?
No, I recruited another business partner who was a carpenter. Again, we maybe had a little bit better of a plan, but we had this idea that our dream goal was to not have any clients. Essentially, he'd do his building ticket, I'd do my landscaping one. We'd buy houses, fix them up, do what we had to do. Geez, if I even started a carpentry apprenticeship, it wouldn't have mattered. Just another ticket to the treasure chest, and we never ended up doing that anyway. So it was good while it lasted. It maybe not finished up as cleanly as the first business partnership, but yeah, we tackled some stuff. Again, we didn't know necessarily what we were doing, but we probably had a slightly better plan, but we just didn't pull it off.
Yeah, so how long was that partnership for?
That was another, probably just short of 5 years. When was that? Mid 2021, I reckon it might have been. We finished up that 21. Yeah, about 2 years since. So mid 21. COVID in the middle of that again probably made things maybe more difficult than what they needed to be.
Absolutely.
So,
And have you had employees throughout that time?
Yeah. So we actually, I might get my years mixed up. I reckon it was mid 2020 we finished that partnership up. So we had an apprentice start probably late 2018, and he's still working for me now. And probably somewhere where we butted heads was maybe in the expansion area. And since that business partner's finished, I've managed to hire a pretty good qualified that takes a lot of pressure off me. And we've got another apprentice at the moment as well. So 2 qualies and an apprentice, now 3rd year. So a good little crew.
So you were wanting to expand and he wasn't? Was that what the direction?
Yeah, probably. And then how we expanded as well. Like, he hadn't got his building ticket at the time, so there was no real rush to sort of get that carpentry apprentice or building apprentice going on. I was doing a lot of the business work, the quotes, the invoicing, that kind of stuff, and probably was the main key to getting a job done on the Monday to Friday, which was long hours and tiring, and I was getting sick, and I'd get a cold, and I'd have a cold for 6 or 7 weeks at a time, and I'm like, I just need some landscape help, which was maybe a little bit difficult to get across. Which was of course much easier once I was making the decisions by myself. It was just a matter of trying to find someone, which was probably almost as difficult as anything I'd done in the previous 10 years of business.
So now you're running the show by yourself?
Yeah. I'll say my wife's part of it, but as in an official capacity, she doesn't work for the business. She's just my sounding board. She's probably more important to the business than maybe I let her know. But yeah, it's probably not uncommon either.
So what's it been like working for yourself for the past 3 years compared to having partnerships? Would you ever have a partnership again?
The short answer is no. I probably wouldn't do a partnership again. As I said, like, my wife's not on the books as part of the business, but I'd consider her a partner of it anyway. And I think bringing in someone to share the burden or something like that in a partnership way, I probably wouldn't do that again. Getting to make the decisions by myself and the direction of the company and that kind of thing is something that I'm quite enjoying. I wouldn't necessarily say that I'm unreal at it, but I certainly think that it's something that I've taken to quite well. Probably a little bit clearer than what I used to be, quite possibly with both business partners. You're always sort of putting forward an agenda or a direction that you want to go to, and it might not suit somebody else. Whereas when I'm by myself, and not that wifey doesn't care, but she's sort of like, oh yeah, no worries, that sounds like a good idea, as long as we can sort of the figures make it sound good and the decisions are sound, then let's do such and such, or buy this or don't buy this. You haven't got the capital to do so. So
And what type of jobs are you working on at the moment? Were you doing a lot of carpentry because you had the carpenter as part of the business, or has that changed since he was on?
It was certainly changed since he's left. We were probably getting more carpentry stuff then, certainly not targeting it now. Getting more carpentry stuff then, little pool houses, or I think we even fixed a kitchen window one time, that kind of stuff. So there was enough of a direction to keep the business partner interested. It probably just, in the end, it probably just wasn't enough carpentry. But of course, we'd been in Living Edge, had been around for a little while, and I'd been, obviously working around Bendigo for 10, 12 years before we started the business. So people knew who I was, and we were getting return customers that were, I did work for them when I was an apprentice and that kind of thing. So the landscape part of Living Edge was probably a little bit too dominant, I suppose, to pick up more carpentry work. But you've got to start somewhere. But it might not have been enough to keep them interested anyway.
Yep. Whenever I see companies that do multiple things, there's usually one that's more dominant. So if you do, there's a lot, like there's some that do concreting and landscaping, but they're usually concreters who just do little bits of landscaping on the side. So it's sort of the opposite to that with landscaping and carpentry. It's sort of the carpentry when it's there, but it's mainly landscaping.
Yeah. Unless you're building the odd deck, there's not a lot of kitchen windows to repair.
Now, I saw one of your Instagram posts recently where you took you guys to Melbourne for the Landscape Victoria Landscape Show. So that's something you've done a couple of years or
Yeah,
when it's on?
I reckon that's I went to one by myself in the middle of COVID. It was right in between times where we didn't have to wear a mask for about 3 seconds. Um, and then I reckon I probably walked out of there and put the news on in the car, and it was like, oh, hell's broken loose again.
Yeah.
That's it. You're not allowed anywhere.
We've had
So that's
five cases.
Yeah. Whereas the last couple of years, the boys and I have gone down. We were missing one this year, but yeah, all four of us went down to where was it? It wasn't at
It was Sandown, was it?
Yeah, it was Sandown this year, but it was wherever else it was the year before. Caulfield.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, the four of us went down to that one. So yeah, like I've been an LV member for, what is it? It's either a bit over maybe 18 months, something like that.
All right.
Yeah. So, but to have an industry body that, again, that was never on the cards prior. So that was another decision I got to make on my own. So
Yeah.
we were HIA members prior. Nothing against them, but that was sort of along the lines of the building, the carpentry. So again, to join in with something that's maybe a little bit more landscape specific was, a good idea.
Yeah, I had a question on the Q&As last week where someone was asking about whether, because I think he was in next to Gippsland, so I was wondering about the value of being a Landscape Victoria member for someone in regional Victoria. So after being there for 18 months, how would you see that?
Certainly the contracts are pretty good, that are obviously a bit more specific. Like navigating myself around a small works contract with HIA there was a lot of things that were, even in the conditions, there was a lot of things that just didn't make sense to a landscape industry based contract, whereas, obviously they're a bit different. We have our regional road shows that LV come up and, take us out for dinner and stuff like that. They're really good. Get to sort of network with a few of the guys that are around town that are members, which, there's a few up here in Bendigo, or at least there's, other invitees that come along. But it's certainly worth doing, even just for the application process, like putting yourself out there, talking about you and the business in a light that, perhaps us as tradies, maybe we're a little bit self-depreciating. We don't necessarily think we're as skilled or as good as what perhaps we are. And because getting into LV is not just you sign up, you pay your monthly fee, and in you go. There's a bit beyond it. Yeah, it's like that in itself is a good process, just for your own confidence, really, if anything.
Yeah. Have you got any projects you're considering entering into the awards in the future?
No, I haven't thought of it. That's another scary thing. Award entries. I've done a couple with my business coaches and stuff like that, and they scare the pants off me doing that. Again, like talking about myself in a light that I'm not necessarily comfortable with. Maybe one day. The older the company gets and the more obvious our work becomes, the better it starts to look, and the better work we get. Yeah, we might eventually stumble across something that's photogenic. I don't know. Maybe a lot of the stuff that we've done in sort of the last couple of years, there's only been maybe a handful of jobs where they're looked after, like Mickey Mouse kind of thing, and you kind of drive past every now and then. You think, oh, I wish there was somebody looking after it, But
that's that's the balance between, because when you first finish it, like it can look good, but the plants are obviously way too small, so they need at least 2 years before they grow and then looks good. So and in that time, if someone's not looking after it, it can turn pear-shaped pretty quick.
Yeah, and it's too hard to get back. Like you got to spend another 3 years of good maintenance and maybe plant replacement or something like that. Like the built environment's looking unreal, but these bunch of correas that are still may as well be in a 6-inch pipe.
Yeah. You look the same the day you put them in.
Yeah, either that or half of them have been chewed off by a kangaroo, or the lawn hasn't been edged forever. It's sitting 100 mil above the edging and that kind of thing because it's just thick and yeah.
You mentioned business coaches before. When did you decide to get a business coach?
Again, probably a bit over 3 years ago. The separation of the second business coach was probably business partner was probably a little bit of a catalyst in that. I'd been again, searching for information, searching for education, I suppose. I didn't feel like I knew what I was doing, as I'd mentioned before, and I needed to know more. Found a podcast, started listening to that, and thought, oh, this is pretty good, and sort of joined on as a pretty cheap subscription member, I suppose, because that's what we could afford. It was pretty small, and just sort of got my foot in the door and was, just learning little bits and pieces, and a lot of, like closed Facebook group sort of things, and a couple of little webinars, and a lot of, as obviously as COVID started to roll on, the Zoom meetings were getting pretty consistent, I suppose. And then, when the business dissolved, or the partnership dissolved, it was like, right, let's go full noise, because now that I'm in it by myself, probably wasn't necessarily I get to make the decision now kind of decision. It was just I need a little bit more help than I can't wing it anymore. Like we've done 10 years or 9 years or something. By that stage, it was, maybe need to start getting a bit better at this.
And that was the Traders in Business podcast. Is that right?
Yes, correct.
And is that what is that what their coaching is called?
Yeah. Traders in Business. We're a tradiepreneur, for want of a better word, mashed between a few words, but yeah.
So, and how much of an impact did that have when you first started, like the full-time sort of stuff?
Massive. I still wouldn't say I'm necessarily unreal at business. I'm not going to start taking on the role of a business coach anytime ever. There's still so much to learn. Obviously I've never done a degree or anything like that. Like there's every day there's still something different that pops up. But the immediate impact was just understanding that I needed a plan, understanding that I needed to start thinking the way. I've got to think different for a start, but thinking the way through a week, or thinking my way through a project, rather than being a tradie and just going, I've got to fix it. Coming up with a different mode of problem solving, which was everything from whatever would happen on site, but also to how my invoices are structured, to how my estimates are structured, to the way that I view those estimates or proposals, as opposed to just calling them a quote, and maybe then delving into variations and that kind of stuff, and not just giving stuff away for free, which I spent the best part of the last 11 and a half, 12 years doing. There's the immediate impact was pretty phenomenal. I haven't bought a paper diary since I joined, because that was one of the first things they said. You just got to get rid of the paper. It's all got to be on your computer. You can have it on your phone, and everything syncs together, and you don't miss stuff. So that was one of the immediate things within the first couple of days. So, and then onwards and upwards from there. Obviously, as you get more into business, and then you understand more, the bigger stuff starts to open up itself. You start to understand how to do your back costing, or how to look at a project and solve it as a business owner, as opposed to a tradie.
Different mindset about it. But so do they teach you things like how to work out how much you need to be charging based on what your expenses are?
There's a bit of education around that. You can jump online and you can find a calculator here, there, and everywhere else. But to understand all the little bits and pieces, I know you've mentioned it before in the potty, that there's stuff that's involved in your hourly charge out rate that you might have that I don't, or something like that. So I spent so long trying to compare myself to Joe Blow down the road, making sure I'm charging the amount, or I'm cheaper, or I'm not too much more expensive. Whereas the reality is there's so much other bits and pieces that go into it. They might have a shed or a yard. I don't have a shed or a yard. We're saving money there. Doesn't necessarily mean I need to charge extra to keep up with the Joneses, but I need to understand all the costs that I've got, which maybe a generic calculator isn't going to quite get for you. But a lot of that was just being able to look at my numbers, being able to look at the profit and loss and go, or the budget, or the cash flow forecast, and understand what I needed to pay for, and therefore what I needed to be charging per hour per fella to be able to make those costs. And then obviously, not a charity, we want to make money, which has taken a long time to get to. But yeah, now it's better than never.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. I had just today, I was thinking about, because I think about it a fair bit, how it's different for every company on how much they need to charge because of certain overheads. And I got my truck serviced and they found there was something wrong with the ABS brakes. So they had to fix that as well. So there's $4,800 I just had to fork out just for the truck. And it's only like 4 or 5 years old. So yeah, there's just, there's $2,000 a year in maintenance every year on it minimum. And there's the insurance and the repayment. So there's so many expensive things that most people don't realise.
No, exactly. And like, we're just about to put electric brakes in our excavator trailer because one of the brake housings literally just fell off. Like it's old. It's something that my first business partner and I bought mid 2013, so it's 10 years old. The trailer's been done a few Ks and now the brake's just sitting in the back toolbox because it fell off as we're driving along. And again, you're looking at more than $2,000 just for a new axle and electric stuff, new hitch and all that kind of thing. But that you can't drive around with an excavator on top of a trailer with no brakes on it. It's probably a little bit dodgy, and WorkSafe might be a little bit unhappy with that as well. So you got to.
What size excavator is it?
Just a little one, little 1.4 Wacker Newson. So it's a jet. We can shrink the tracks in and get into a side gate or take the cab off, and we can get into almost anything. So it's probably one of those machines I'll never get rid of. But geez, it squeaks and groans and rattles and does all its stuff. So it's not the tidiest machine anymore.
Yeah. And so would you have that on every job?
Almost. Again, because it's so small, like it can get into anything. So even if we're just loading barrows, it's still a pretty big benefit. I did have a Bobcat. That was one of the things I got rid of pretty quickly as soon as the partnership dissolved. I think it was probably a little bit too big for the truck that we had at the time. So maybe a little bit of a safety cause for concern. But I just didn't want the Bobcat as well. Like there was a lot of small residential stuff that the Bobcat was just sort of sitting at my house. It'd spend weeks on end sitting there, whereas the excavator is pretty much every time we can hide it out in the backyard of a home or something like that, it's there.
Yeah. So do you have to hire any other machines that help out with anything?
Only ever so often, probably rarely, I suppose. We normally just hire or sub out our excavation to, like, especially bigger stuff, to a mate of mine who's got his own truck and Bobcat and bigger excavators. Should we, being Bendigo, you get your pretty solid ground up here. The old 1.4 ton excavator might struggle with a few of the rocks that we get around here. So having something a bit bigger on site is pretty necessary at times. So, but occasionally we'll get a little bobby if we've just got to do a quick clean up ourselves and that kind of thing. What
is the soil like there? Is it consistent everywhere around Bendigo?
Consistently poor. You get certain suburbs are more rocky than others, but like where I am, sort of in the southeastern side of Bendigo, it's probably a little bit more farmland. Like the ground's hard, the clay's pretty solid, but there's not a lot of rock around. Whereas you go to the other side, sort of the southwestern side, it's just you try and drill holes for a retaining wall or something like that, and you're making all sorts of groaning and grinding sounds and ruining the day that the rock breaker has to turn up or the jackhammer gets out just to break some little things up. So it can get pretty hard out there.
And is that basalt, is it?
Nah, all sandstone. We get our basalt probably a little bit further south than us. In a little town, Axdale, there's just bluestone everywhere through there, and then down towards Castlemaine, the rock changes again. A lot more volcanic down there as well. So here it's just hard and horrible, and it's just rubbish soil. 9 times out of 10, it's just ordinary.
So, are you doing any work for designers or designed yourself?
I try not to design myself. As I said before, I'm pretty good at thinking of a plan. I'm really bad at putting it down on paper, certainly with some sort of design flair anyway. We get a little bit through a lady up here that does, I suppose we first come across her maybe about, what are we? Probably mid-2000s, I suppose. Sorry, mid-2010s. And then I got her to do my last house before we moved out here. I got her to do that, and then we just sort of ticked along doing maybe 3 or 4 of her designs every year. Every now and then we probably do a little bit more than that, but they're fun to work with. They're probably a concept design as opposed to like a master plan with a lot of detail and that kind of stuff. But so there's a fair bit that's open for interpretation. But I know there's another bloke around here in Bendigo who does some absolutely Mickey Mouse work, and he gets some cracking designer type work. So it'd be nice to kind of dip my toe in that and get some really good, as I said, master plan type landscape designing work would be pretty cool. Yeah, broaden the horizons a little bit.
Will you go to any of the Landscape Victoria events, like the one that recently was just generally a catch up, if it's close enough? So the reason I ask that is because that's a great place to meet designers, and they'll get asked to design all over the state.
Yeah. The one that was a week ago, end of August. The only reason why I didn't go to that is pretty close to wifey's birthday, and then purely distance for that one. But yeah, I mean, if it was maybe this side of Melbourne, I'm happy to drive to Melbourne or Geelong or something like that. But for me to have got down to whatever suburb it was, it was like 3.5 hours each way. So maybe a little bit quicker at night when traffic disappears. But yeah, would have been a big afternoon in the car.
They always seem to do roadworks at night, though. You think, it's going to be an easy run home. It's 11 o'clock at night, and then next thing you know, it's one lane. There's usually 3.
Yeah, especially the Calder. They don't do real well. They like to space out their roadwork there.
So what's the plan going forward with the size of your team? Would you keeping it the 2 qualified and an apprentice, and then just gradually add an apprentice later on?
Yeah, I think so. Like gradual growth would be good. We've probably got enough work at the moment that I could easily run a second team. Again, finding the right candidates for a second team's the difficult part. There's still there's a heap of work in Central Victoria as a whole, and a bunch of really good landscapers, and the guys that work for each one of them, they're entrenched. Not that I'm trying to poach anyone, but the guys that you want working are already working, and they're pretty happy where they are. There's quite a few landscapers doing some good work, and the competition's there. So as far as trying to get staff, so yeah, trying to build myself up to bringing on another apprentice or something like that, and then sort of training them how I want them to work, or my staff want them to work, and then we can I suppose promote in-house as opposed to trying to find another qualified, because they're just few and far between.
Yep. And you mentioned you're not on the tools as much anymore. So when did that transition take place?
That was instigated through the business coaching, being again changing the mindset, changing how, obviously with having some good staff members made that little bit easier. But yeah, going from doing quotes at 1 o'clock in the morning to doing quotes at 1 o'clock in the afternoon has been it's an absolute game changer. There's so many things that I've gone, geez, I would have missed that.
Yeah.
So this year I've moved to having a Tuesday and Thursday. Prior to that, it was always just a Thursday. So a little bit of a risk in taking an extra day, but it's panning out okay. And yeah, there's still plenty. It's one of those things. You spend a day in the office and you think, I could probably do 2 days. There's a bit of work here, and now I spend 2 days in the office. Could probably spend 8 days in the office per week, and I'll probably still be looking for time. So yeah, there's always more to find.
Yeah, it's funny. Like I get overwhelmed with the amount of office work I have to do, but then when I actually start doing one of the tasks that I've been sitting on for 4 weeks, it takes me 20 minutes to do it. And it was just sort of in my head, it was a lot bigger than what it actually was. But it's just a million of those little things that you got to get done.
Yeah, absolutely. Like I've got a list here of my to-do list, and yeah, same thing. I'm looking at that going, that quote's going to take ages to do. And you start it and you're like half an hour later, you're like, oh, yeah, right. How come I didn't do it last week? So yeah. You sort of, you kind of assume everything takes longer or everything's going to be harder than what it actually is.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's all learning.
So how often do you speak to your business coaches?
I have a private session that's a couple of times a month. but we'd have regular sessions twice a week, and then there's another fortnightly one that gets thrown in there as well. Another two fortnightly ones that get thrown in there as well. So it's not a lot of time. Like we're talking sort of hour-long Zoom meeting kind of thing. You get out what you put in. I'm a bit of a stickler at making sure I get to pretty much everything that's on the calendar. But what are we talking? Maybe 45 hour, sort of 3 to 5 hours a week would probably be the average that I do. So it's intensive, but it's not overbearing, and yeah, good fun, good support. Often there could be 5, could be 20 other people in the meeting as well, like firing questions away and that kind of stuff. So you get some good input from other business owners that are not just landscapers. There's all sorts, and mostly Eastern Seaboard type stuff, but there's a couple Adelaide, Western Australia, that kind of thing. So yeah, there's a good mix, and a good mix of I suppose business levels, how long they've been in business or what type of business and that kind of stuff. And yeah, you get a lot of good input from a lot of good people. So have
you heard anything from like a different industry, like someone was talking about or getting advice on, and you thought that would relate to what you're doing?
Yeah. And often that'll come from an industry that you think would not relate to, you can kind of argue sort of your carpentry, building, landscaping, they're sort of similar. Like there's a lot of hats to wear. There's a lot of different elements to it, whereas something like your plumber or your sparky, they kind of just do that. And then often they'll have maybe a different job management system or a different way of running the business, but there's just that little bit of information, like as far as keeping a tab on how long the boys are on a project or something like that. You go, okay, right, I can kind of twist that to work for something that might go for a month as opposed to 3 hours. So yeah, sometimes it's surprising the type of industry that you get a good bit of input from.
Yeah, that's something I've always found challenging for sparkies and plumbers is some of their jobs are just so short. So you got to the planning that they would have to do is I couldn't do.
Absolutely, I'd struggle to plan a month-long job, let alone an hour-long job. Yeah.
So what do you do outside of work to keep your mind sane and just keep yourself interested?
Keep my mind sane. I'm a bit of a cyclist. I don't know if that is a real good idea to keep your mind sane. Yeah, spend more time worrying about the cars coming from behind you than you do how many Ks you've done. But that's something that I've liked to do for quite a while now. I had a bit of a knee injury playing indoor soccer 15 years ago, and I pretty much haven't run and jumped since. So cycling can, something a little bit low impact, which is something I can recover and it doesn't damage the knee too much. I'm not doing an awful lot at the moment, but yeah, time to get back into it. I think as the weather warms up, it gets that little bit easier. But yeah, the more the merrier.
Have you got multiple bikes?
Oh, I do. Yeah. Much to my storage room's stress and my wife's disgust that I should get another one as well. She's like, no. Yeah, there's a few there. Yeah.
Yeah, I see. Yeah, my first boss, he was he did triathlon, so he did the Hawaiian Ironman, so he had a pretty fancy bike as well. But people you see who are into cycling, they've got multiple bikes and got wheels hanging everywhere. And we did a job for one of the guys who was a domestique for Eddie Merckx.
Oh yeah.
So he had some pretty intense bikes and a lot more photos than anything. But it's an addictive hobby, I think.
Oh yeah, and it's not cheap either. So every time you come home with a new carbon fiber bike, somebody's going to be upset.
I got into it, but I think early on I got a puncture. So then I had a puncture kit to fix it, but I didn't know how to do it. So I was just walking home and thought, I'm not doing this again.
Yeah. You can end up in a pretty bad spot when you're bike riding. Again, it doesn't take much to fall off, but you kind of wish and hope that it doesn't happen with another vehicle involved. But it can be as simple as a puncture and a 25k walk home in socks because you can't walk in the shoes. So it's a long day.
Yeah. So we had a job their client was a cyclist, and the one of the guys was working there, and the police rocked up with his bike because he'd been cleaned up by a car and had a broken pelvis. So, yeah, but there's not much between you and a car.
No, there's not much, and obviously there's not a lot of protective gear. It's not motorbike riding. There's no leathers or anything like that. So there's a fair bit of risk involved in it, especially if you're racing or something like that. It can, usually the crashes are maybe a bit more road rash or anything like that if it's a bike race. But I haven't done a collarbone, but touch wood, I don't do anyone anytime soon. But,
apparently it's the most painful bone to break.
Oh, I could imagine. There's a few of the fellas getting around that have done a couple. My son was racing BMX. He's not now, but there's plenty of broken collarbones going around in a BMX track. That's for sure.
My son broke his collarbone, but that's because he's clumsy. He just literally fell over at school. He broke his collarbone. That's part of the experience. I know that it's the most painful.
Last
question for you, Steve, is who do you think would be a good guest to have on the podcast?
It's a good question because I always think who would be good as far as somebody to interview, but then somebody who's got some good input. So I'm gonna say Simon Rosa. He's another landscaper up here.
Well, name rings a bell.
Well, he's got a brother that played AFL footy for West Coast. So but Simon's been around for a long time. He actually did as far as I'm aware, his apprenticeship for the company that I worked for before I started the business. So there's a little bit of a common thing going on there. Not that I've worked with him, but I reckon he'd have to be in business for maybe 20 years or something like that up here. So I reckon he'd be a good interview. Big crew, does some cracking jobs. So
cool. All right. I'll do that. But thank you very much for coming on. And because I was keen to talk to you about the business coach idea as well. So because there's a lot of people who ask me about who I'd recommend. So it's good to have someone who's actually got one and used one and benefited from it. So thank you very much for coming on and sharing that.
No worries. Thanks for having me.